Hey everybody, what's up? Fuller here. Thanks so much for checking out the channel where we talk about Unreal Engine audio and MetaSounds and the composer life. And in today's video, we're going to be wrapping up our Harmonix plugin series, and I'm going to show you kind of a way to use the step sequencer in the Unreal Engine to build a basic drum sequencer, like a drum machine or a step sequencer, if you will. This one happens to play drum samples, but it'll kind of show you the basic 4x8 grid drum sampler that a lot of you are very familiar with. So the main purpose of this video is to show you how to use the blueprints to communicate with the step sequencer in real time and activate on and off each of the different steps. We're going to do that in a very simple way, in a very efficient way, hopefully. Now, if you want to see this sampler in action, you can click on the little video below. I got a little demo there if you want to check that out. Also, please make sure you watch the first 3 videos in this series because we talk about the Harmonix plugin, we talk about the MIDI player, we talk about the Fusion sampler, and we talk about the step sequencer, and that gets us up to this point. So if you haven't watched those other videos and you're just jumping in now, this might be a little confusing, but if you already know the Fusion plugin, then this video is fine for you, so let's jump on in. So now there are a few parts about this, and the thing about MetaSounds is MetaSounds is a part of the Unreal Audio Engine ecosystem, and a lot of the power in MetaSound lies in the blueprint scripting of communication with the MetaSounds, and so this project's going to be a real good example of how that all comes together. Now we've got a few pieces. So here is let me just do a little walk around here. This is basically this fake 3D model that I built, and what this is made up of this thing right here. This is a blueprint they're called BP_step, and then all of these are instances of that blueprint. And all this blueprint is, if you look here, is just this knob. That's all it is. It's this knob, and we've got some logic so that when you hit it with something, it does some stuff, and we're going to show you that in a minute. So we've got 4x8 of these, and we're gonna, this row represents kick, snare, hi-hat, and clap, okay? So that's all this is. You can build this, and then I put this box here just to kind of make it look, but here you can see them all floating in space. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of boxes, okay? That's all. Okay, now that's not the important part. The important part is what happens when you hit them, okay? So we're gonna be talking about a couple things. So we're going to be looking at 2 different step sequencers. We're going to be looking at our drum step sequencer, which you can see here is blank. And again, if you're not sure what this is, go back and watch my last video where I show you how to build a step sequence. And then this is a step sequencer here we're going to use to trigger the tongue drum samples that I recorded in our Fusion sampler video. Again, all of this is cumulative. We've got our MetaSound here, which is going to be playing those. And then we've got our button, our BP step button. Then we have our first person map where we have, now this is all the logic that's happening here. So this is all of the logic happening in our level. That's it, just this. This is basically allowing us to do all these things. So if you just see here, so when you pick up the gun here, you can see each step is triggering the sample at that sequence. So you can hear that hi-hat, and so if we did the hi-hat on all of them, you would just hear the hi-hat continuously. And then that's it. So just close these out. Red is off and green is on. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. Now let's get into the logic of this. Okay, so let's look at the step sequencer for the drum. We've added basically 4 columns, note 60, 62, 64, 65, okay? Why is this important? Well, because in our Fusion sampler, we're going to play those notes. Oh, we also have this drum machine Fusion sampler here, where I basically took 4 samples, the kick drum, let's see here, I took the snare, so kick is 60, snare is 62, hi-hat 64, clap is 65. So anytime MIDI note 64 plays, it's going to be a hi-hat. Anytime MIDI note 65 plays, it's going to be a clap, etc. That's our Fusion sampler. If you want to know how to build this, go watch my video on Fusion samplers. I show you how to build it with the tongue drum, but it works for any instrument. And then if you want to see kind of the samplers here, here are the tongue drum samples. Okay. And we got, here are the drum sounds. And these are just basic sounds from a Lindrum style drum machine. We're using the first person template because I wanted a way to shoot stuff, and that's the quickest way to do it. So we're in the first person template. We come pick up the gun. If I can pick it up there, and then anytime you hit these, it triggers stuff. Okay, so let's go and check out the first thing, which is our MetaSound. It's a pretty simple MetaSound. What we have here is on play. We're going to trigger our music transport. We're going to start a MIDI clock, and we're going to play two sequences. We're going to play our tongue drum sequence, which is this, which is the bells that you hear that sound like this. That is our tongue drum sampler, and you're hearing this pattern played over and over and over. And the only reason I did this is because I wanted something that let us hear where the beats were, so that we could hear as the drums come in, they're happening on the beats. So up here, we're playing the tongue drum step sequencer through the Fusion sampler of the tongue drum that I built, that you can build too if you watch my other video. And then coming out here at the same time, we're starting our MetaSound step sequencer drum layer, which is currently blank, okay? So now what we want to do is when we hit these buttons, we want to populate these triggers with a pattern. So if I just made this pattern here and I hit play, you would hear that pattern, okay? But that's not what we want. We want to start with this blank. So we're going to start with this blank. And right now the pattern's playing. You're just not hearing anything because there's no notes that are on. So what we are going to do is we've got the MetaSound playing, okay? These controls right here I created, but I'm not using them. So basic setup of the step sequencer player. Now, again, I'm not going to waste too much time on this because my other video covers this. But let's look at this. Here's the fun part. All right, so we're basically building this button. How do we do this? Well, I made a cube just by coming up here and adding a cube. And then I colored it. That's all I did, okay? So then what I did, I clicked on cube and I went over here to event graph. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go on component hit, which basically means when a bullet hits it, it's going to do something. What is it going to do? Well, I want it to do two different things. The first time it gets hit, I want it to turn the node on. And the second time it gets hit, I want it to turn the node off. So that's what the flip-flop is for. So we come in here, we hit the flip-flop. So the first time it gets hit, what are we going to do? Well, here's our cube, right? This is called cube, for lack of a better name. So over here, I get a reference to the cube by dragging it in, just like that. Then I come out here and I'm setting the material. And this is just more of an artsy thing, give a little bit of feedback. So what I did here is I set this to green, and then on the second time you hit it, I set it to red. And so when you hit it on, it's green for on. When you hit it off, it's red for off. Now, along with that, I added a gratuitous explosion. So when you hit the button, it triggers an explosion upon hit. So you see that little explosion? It's totally unnecessary, but I thought it was fun, so I did that. And it's good to mess around with the Niagara systems and things like that just to get used to them. So we come out here, we set the material, we fire an explosion at the location of the cube. Here it is, get world location. That's where we want our explosion to fire. Then here's where the magic happens. Okay, so what I did is I created an event dispatcher. And the way you do that is you just go over to event dispatcher and hit plus, and that's going to create an event dispatcher. And then after you get that event dispatcher, you can come over here and you can create inputs and outputs. So what happens here is when you send this event dispatcher, it also sends this information. Now, each one of these buttons are going to send different information, right? The first one's going to say row 0, cell 0, right? Which is the first index of the first row. The second one's going to say row 0, column 2. And that's going to send that specific command. Now, the way we do this is we add these to the event dispatcher, we add a Boolean for on/off, we add an int for row and an int for column. Then what we do is we come off of here and we create variables, okay? So we create our variable and then we set that variable to instance editable. So what that allows us to do is that allows us, so when we go over to our first person map and we click on one of these, if you look right over here, we now have these variables, row and column. So I can go in here and add instances of these and change each one. So basically, when I hit this one, it's gonna send the information row 0, column 7. And so this is a really efficient way to build blueprints in your logic. So what we're doing is we're storing these as instance editable variables. Now, when we hit it again, it turns it off, and you'll see here. So this one, on/off, is true. That means it's set on. And then this one comes out here, on/off is false. So basically, just to recap, you hit the cube, it turns the material green, it tells it which row and which column to turn on. And that's gonna correspond to this drum sequencer. So row 1, cell 1 is actually index 0, 0. So this is 0, 0. So when 0, 0 gets hit, it's gonna turn that green and play that step. And when it turns off, it's gonna turn it gray and not play that step. So that's the beauty of this. So kind of see how our logic is working here. So we've got our step done. That's all for our step. Now that we've built this step and we have it down here, we can go into our, see here, where are we at? Here it is. We can go in here, and now that we have this step right here, we can actually drag this anywhere we want and make another step and then just assign it to row 20, column 2, if you had that many, but we don't, so we're not gonna do it. So what I did is I dragged these all in individually and then I aligned them in a nice beautiful square. Then I went and I set this row 0, column 1, row 0, column 2, all the way row 0, column 7. Same here, this is row 1, 0 through row 1, 7, row 2, 0 through row 2, 7 right here, and then row 3, 0 to row 3, 7. That, it's kind of annoying because it's always one less than it actually is. So one sequence step 1 of row 1 is actually 0, 0. So you just add 1 to everything. And so now what's gonna happen, when we hit that, it's gonna send that event. So now what we have to do is we have to set up our level map to get those events. And the way we do this, we go into first person, okay? And then on begin play, I have a delay here. I'm not sure why I did that, just in case there was a race, but I don't think we need it. So how do we now get this event, okay? How do we get these events and how do we tell them to change this pattern, okay? And this is a little bit complicated, so just follow along here and pause it and slow down if you have to, and then try to build it yourself. That usually helps, okay? So what we do is you're gonna open this up and all you're gonna see is this, okay? This is all gonna be blank, okay? So we're gonna leave that here for now. We're gonna go over here, we're gonna create a variable, and we're gonna create that variable to be, we don't need this one actually. We're gonna create a variable of MIDI step sequence, okay? So we're just come over here, we're gonna click it over here, and we're gonna type MIDI step sequence object reference, okay? And that gives us this type of variable, and we could call this whatever, Fuller. Then we can come over here and we can shift drag this to set it. And then what we can do is we can set that to any of these step sequences. So right now we've got MS drum. So that's what we do. And so when we hit begin play, it's going to create this variable and set our drum sequencer to it. Now we have a reference to it, okay? So let's piece this back together. Now, how do we get the events from all of those blueprints, okay? So there's what, 8, 16, 32 of them. Should have known that, 32 of them. And the way we do this is by a node called get all actors of class. Now, this is an expensive node, but we're only doing it on begin play. right? And then what are we doing? We're getting. But what are we getting? Well, we're getting BP step. So everything that's BP step, we want to find it. And then now we can bind that event. And the way we do that, we drag out here and we call bind. What did we call? Sequence, here it is. Bind event to send sequence ons. That's what we called it. Say if we look over here, that's what we called it. Call sequencer ons, okay? So we have now bound that to sequencer ons. Now what we can do is we can create our own custom event. Let's see, what did I call it over here? I called it, here, I'll just copy this over, save us some time. Bring this over. All right. We called this set step on. That's what we called it. And I don't think I can I drag that? Yeah, I can drag it right there. So we created this event called set step. Now let me just show you how to do this real quick. If you drag this and hit custom event, oop, spelled wrong. Add custom event, boom, there it is. Now, if you notice something, this actually populated itself with 3 variables, on, off, row, and column. That means that it is actually working because that's what we're sending here, on, off, row, column. So now, anytime any of those blueprints trigger that event, this thing is going to fire. Now, we're almost done, but here is the money part. This is what we need, our set cell. So let's drag over, let's delete that one. All right, let's drag over here our reference to our get step sequence. Then we're going to drag off here and we're going to type set cell. There's other things you can do too, and if you want to play around with this stuff, if you just type MIDI, look at all these things you can do. Get cell, disable cell, set row numbers, toggle cell. You can do all sorts of stuff. But all we want to do is set cell. And what this is going to do is this is going to set the cell on or off. Okay? The only thing we need to know now is which one do we want to set on. Well, that's where these numbers come in. 0, 0, 0, 1. We've already labeled those and taken care of that. So now all we got to do is from here, we fire the state on or off. Then we go row to row, column to column. And now we can get rid of this because that's what we just built. And that's how you set it up. Now, just to recap, every time that we hit one of those boxes, when we hit this one, it's going to send 0, 0. And that event's going to get picked up here, and it's going to set cell 0, 0, because that's the row in the column, and it's going to set it to either on or off. Now, is it going to set it to on or off? Well, that depends. Is it the first time you hit it, it goes to on, true. Second time you hit it, it goes on, false. So you're turning it off on the first time, you're turning it off the second time. Now, let's just check this out and see if it works. Here we go. Do it on clap. Oh, I got to get my gun. Perfect. And here's what's cool. When I come out of here and I stop it, let's go back to our sequencer. Look, it actually stored the information in our step sequencer file, which is kind of crazy. So it actually saves this information in real time to your file. Now, if you were going to actually use this, you would have to set up another function in the game that cleared that all to 0. And you could do that with the blueprint as well. So that's pretty much it. So now what's crazy though is because we use this instance editable variables and we did a very efficient get all actors of class and we put 32 of them in here, all we need is this one script right here to arm and disarm all 32 of those based on the row and column variable. Now remember, when you make your step, you got to make sure that these are instance editable. What that means is that every time you put it down, you're going to have access to that variable, and you can set those variables here in the design, and that gives you a ton of flexibility. And it's something that took me a while to learn, and once I learned it, I was very powerful with MetaSounds. And so that's something you need to learn also. I do have a video on event dispatchers. You can check that out and all that. So anyways, I hope this was helpful. That wraps up our series on the Harmonix plugins. Hope you learned some cool stuff. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment if you will. We're over 2,000 subscribers now, which is really cool. I appreciate all of your support. Hope you have a great time, and we'll see you in the next video.